Yes, I know, yet another video essay about the MCU's decline. To be honest, I wasn't originally going to do a video on this topic because it has already been covered more than enough times. However, after the release of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, I felt compelled to share my thoughts on the MCU's dissension and share possible solutions. But before we can offer solutions, we must first analyze the symptoms. A few years back, Martin Scorsese famously or infamously, depending on where you stand, expressed that he believed that Marvel movies were not cinema, and instead were more comparable to theme parks. Now, many people scoffed at Scorsese's statement and claimed his rant to be another case of the older generation hating on what is new. But to be fair, the reason as to why his words were received so poorly was because at the time, the Infinity Saga was wrapping up with Endgame, and Marvel was at its peak. But fast forward to now, and I have to admit, Scorsese's words back then couldn't ring any truer now, as the MCU has fallen into mediocrity. And one reason for the MCU's decline can be attributed to its lack of focus. Let's take Eternals for example. This movie tried to tackle too much material and overall became a tangled mess. It introduced too many characters, and as a result, not enough time was given to properly develop them. And what's even worse is that by the end of the movie, almost a third of the main cast dies, and another third of them is taken away by Arishem the Celestial. So, not only are the characters given little development, their potential for development was halted. For instance, I would have loved to have seen Icarus fight alongside the Avengers, but since he flew into the sun, that hope is gone. And I know he can be revived, but having Icarus come back after such a stupid end would be lame. Also, when Arishem took away Cersei, Kingo, and Phastos, I didn't care because they weren't developed enough for me to care. In addition, this movie shoehorned cameos that overcrowded the movie instead of strengthening it. This movie did not need the Black Knight, nor did it need Star Fox's lackluster appearance. Hence, these cameos which were made to create hype just made the movie feel overbloated. And instead of allocating its focus on numerous plot lines, the movie should have focused on one. Therefore, this movie serves less as a complete singular story and more as a commercial for other Marvel projects. Another prime example of a movie being served to advertise is Doctor Strange 2: Multiverse of Madness. See, the greatest disappointment that Doctor Strange 2 provided was that at its core, it wasn't a Doctor Strange movie. I mean, it was a Doctor Strange movie in that it starred the Sorcerer Supreme, but it failed to explore Strange's character in a meaningful way, compared to how films like Captain America: Winter Soldier explored Steve Rogers, or how Thor: Ragnarok explored Thor. Instead, this movie allocated much of its focus on other narratives. Rather than being only a Doctor Strange movie, this movie was also a sequel to WandaVision, also an origin story for America Chavez, also a setup for Secret Wars with the introduction of the Illuminati, and also a setup for Doctor Strange 3 with a Clea cameo at the end. Therefore, with all these story beats, Doctor Strange 2 feels more like a bunch of stories starring Doctor Strange than one story for Doctor Strange. And as a result of this lack of focus, the plot becomes diluted, and Doctor Strange 2 becomes an advertisement for other projects. And this concept of product dilution is also evident in Thor: Love and Thunder. At the beginning of the MCU, Thor had it rough, but in Ragnarok and throughout Infinity War and Endgame, he became a well-rounded character. Unfortunately though, all of that good character development went away with Love and Thunder. See, one thing that the MCU has always been praised for was its humor.
I do. I understood that reference.
It was a good way to alleviate tension, but also make the superheroes relatable. However, the sense of humor that the MCU was once praised for would also be what the MCU would become ridiculed for. Now, there is nothing wrong with writing jokes in a movie, but jokes shouldn't be overused or misplaced, because when used inappropriately, the story cannot be taken seriously. I understand that what made Thor Ragnarok so great was its sense of humor, but it must also be remembered that another integral component that facilitated the movie's greatness was its solemn moments. Whether it be Odin giving his farewell to his sons, or Loki and Thor rekindling their kinship, Thor Ragnarok had moments that made us care and respect the characters. In addition, these serious moments would then lead to other consequential moments, such as Thor losing Asgard and his eventual redemption with the aid of his mother. And yet, after this marvelous evolution of Thor throughout the MCU, his character, who was once an aspiring hero, was turned into a jester in Love and Thunder. And it just sucks seeing one of Marvel's pillars collapse. Now, every franchise has its pillars. For instance, DC's pillars are Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. For X-Men, it's Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Professor X, and Magneto. In Dragon Ball Z, it's Goku, Vegeta, and Gohan. I could give endless examples, but I think you get the point. Pillars are the main anchors of the franchise. They are their franchise's identity and are their main catalysts that move the story forward. Hence, without a pillar, a franchise has no identity and has an unanchored story. In the MCU's case, its pillars were Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. But currently, Iron Man is dead, Captain America is retired, and Thor's future is uncertain in terms of his storyline, but more concerningly, in terms of Chris Hemsworth's health. Now, I don't want to come off as complaining that Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and possibly Chris Hemsworth are leaving their roles. They were getting old anyways, and their withdrawal was inevitable. However, what I will complain about is Marvel Studios' ineptitude in properly giving the original pillars appropriate replacements. We are now in phase 5 of the MCU and still have no idea on who will take on the helm as the new pillars. And frankly, I don't think there have been any characters so far that can carry the weight of the previous big three or carry the same charisma. My hope is that by Secret Wars, the MCU develops its characters enough to establish new pillars. However, if these aforementioned problems persist, then Marvel is in big trouble. Now last, but certainly not least, we have to discuss the new big bad of the MCU, Kang. And unfortunately, Kang's introduction has been underwhelming. I mean, his introduction in Loki as He Who Remains was interesting, but his follow-up appearance fumbled his momentum. Spoilers ahead for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania in 3, 2, 1. But in the movie, Kang loses to Ant-Man. Now this is a big problem because Kang is supposed to be the new multiversal threat that is supposed to be taken as seriously, if not more seriously, than Thanos, and yet he lost to a low-level Avenger. That's like having Frieza lose to Krillin. We love Krillin and we love Ant-Man, but if the villain loses to them, then the villain cannot be taken seriously. Instead, Kang should have defeated Scott Lang to establish himself as a considerable threat. Comparably, if we look at Kang's predecessor Thanos, we see a perfect example of how to establish a threat. From Thanos' manipulation of Loki to wreak havoc on New York, which as a result left the Avengers, especially Tony Stark, scarred and paranoid of a new invasion, or Thanos' demanding presence in front of Ronan the Accuser in Guardians of the Galaxy. It was through Thanos' actions and presence that he established himself as a proper threat. Even in Infinity War, Thanos single-handedly defeated the Avengers multiple times, yet Kang loses to Ant-Man? Whether or not Marvel is aware of it, Kang's defeat from Ant-Man blundered any anticipation for his future appearances, and more significantly, blundered any anticipation for the next big MCU event, Avengers Kang Dynasty. Well, although the mistakes made in Phase 4 and now Phase 5 are irreversible, there are still some things that can alleviate much of the issues plaguing the MCU. And the first solution is to focus on quality over quantity. Previously, in the first 3 phases of the MCU, we got 2 or 3 projects a year, and the quality was somewhat consistent. Now, we get multiple movies and seasons of new shows that are clearly made to inflate Disney Plus's value. Don't get me wrong, characters such as Agatha and Echo are cool, but I can guarantee that virtually no one is ecstatic for the TV shows. Also, a Riri Williams show can be interesting, but she hasn't been given enough development to garner interest for her own TV show, at least for me. I think that Marvel is rushing her to the forefront instead of meticulously easing her into it. Similarly to how Loki, Falcon, and the Winter Soldier were in the MCU for 10 years before they got a show, Riri needs similar treatment. Now, I'm not saying to wait 10 years, but what I am saying is that her one appearance in Wakanda Forever is not sufficient enough for her to have her own TV show. Riri just needs more time to grow with the audience and grow as a character, so that when she is given a big opportunity, like her own TV show, the transition from secondary character to main character is natural and earned. In brief, Marvel is doing way too much too soon, and they need to step off the gas and take their time to develop their characters deliberately and not just shove them to the forefront. Now, this leads to my second solution, which is that Marvel needs to focus more on characters and less on misplaced humor, shoehorned cameos, and convoluted plot lines to fit quotas. For instance, what was great about Iron Man was that it was a story focused on Tony Stark's journey, and the Easter eggs and cameos were like sprinkles on top of an already well-made sundae. The same can be said for movies like Thor Ragnarok or Captain America Civil War. Ragnarok started the Hulk, but it was still a movie about Thor, and Civil War started the Avengers, but the story still focused on Captain America. But currently, every Marvel movie seems to have this need to fit certain quotas of having to insert X amount of cameos or referencing X plotline from X movie. And as a result, these new Marvel movies feel like they were automated in a factory instead of feeling like stories made with heart and character. So, that's all I have to say about the state of the MCU. The MCU has been the most potent franchise in cinema for the past decade, and to see it struggle like this is hard to watch. And it's a shame, because the source material from the comics is rich with a variety of interesting characters and masterfully told stories. All in all, I want Marvel to succeed, and this video is not aimed to bash Marvel, but to participate in a conversation on the internet by fans who missed the golden age of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and like always, thank you so much for watching.